This podcast is dedicated to sharing the practice of meditation, the philosophy of Western Buddhism, and the refuge and love of our TBC Sangha. Offering solutions that are simple, practical, and true. We believe happiness and better health are available to all people and for all people. We are here each week to lend wisdom and support to all who are making or considering making this journey. This is On the Range. Welcome to On the Range. This is lucky episode number 13, and I'm your host. My name is Whit. I'm honored to serve and thrilled to be here. This week, we are very happy to have Jordan Colley on as our co-host. Jordan, welcome back. How are you?
Whit, I'm doing well, and I'm very excited to have a Halloween episode with you. So spooky.
Yeah. Between the fact that this is episode number 13 and the fact that it falls right in the middle of spooky season, that time of year when scary is in vogue and Halloween is on the horizon. With that in mind, we thought we would discuss the season in general and fear in particular, and consider it from the perspective of Western Buddhism and the power of meditation. So, to that end, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, Jordan, tell me, do you like Halloween?
Yes, for one, feel like I have to say that because of the household I was raised in. My mom was a book fanatic, a horror movie fanatic. So I always grew up with Stephen King on the shelf and Anne Rice, and we watched Christine and It and Pet Sematary and all of the classics. And I remember my mom just, making popcorn and treats, and we would get scared. And, she decorated her house. She ended up in the newspaper a few times because of her collection. So it was awesome when I was going through my goth phase because I felt like the aesthetic really matched my vibe. But no, I love Halloween. It reminds me of my mom. I like to carry on a lot of the traditions that she kind of passed down. And I'll be honest, I don't watch so much horror movies anymore, but I do still love the classics. What about you? I'm curious.
Halloween falls in my, right in the middle of my favorite time of year. Love the autumn. I love some of the things that it that it kind of brings about, that it kind of signals, if that makes any sense. I like jack-o'-lanterns. I love taking the kids when I had little kids for, to trick or treat and to carve pumpkins and all that. But I'm not a fanatic about it. It doesn't, we do a little bit around the house, but not much. We certainly welcome trick-or-treaters, but it's never gotten much more than that. I've always been kind of a casual participant in the holiday. If it fell in the spring, I don't know that I would be as interesting or as interested in it. But because of where it falls, also, you never know whether you're going to get an 80-degree night or whether it's going to be, below zero or below freezing, and you've got to be all bundled up. So it was always kind of interesting. But I do think it's an interesting holiday also because it does such a nice job of pulling neighborhoods together. Maybe not all of them. I know there's certainly some that aren't as impacted, but it's kind of the ideal suburban holiday in that it doesn't fall on a special day of the week. If it's a Monday, then okay, we'll have Halloween on Monday, and everybody goes and does their thing. So I like it. I don't love it, but I find it very interesting, all the symbolism and how it's evolved. So are you surprised at how much the holiday has grown?
Yes, I am surprised. I mean, I've always feel like it's just been immensely popular to just kind of I don't remember it lasting like all month or even like in in September. Like I think the whole romanticizing pumpkin spice and all of it's pretty wild. But we push consumerism. So, I did have a fun thought though, because I was unsure how much you liked Halloween, but I wanted to inspire you by giving you some Buddhist related costumes that might work out if you want.
All
So I have
right.
so I have three, so you have plenty to choose from. The first one is the procrastinating monk. All you need is robe, mala beads, and a sign that says, I'll meditate tomorrow. And
Gonna write that one down.
okay,
I think I
perfect.
have all those things.
All right, great. So you could also be a Buddha bowl. You could be a big salad and glue fake veggies and tofu, and you would be 100% enlightened ingredients, and that is spiritual and nutritious.
Wow.
All right, last one. I really feel like you're gonna like this one. This one is the reincarnated goldfish. All you have to do is dress in orange and with some fins, and then tell people you were a monk once.
All right. I think you've covered it. In fact, we're just going to go ahead and wrap up the episode because that is obviously the high point. The high
Okay.
point is the Buddhist-based Halloween costumes from our good friend Jordan. So well done. Well done, my friend. One of the things I wanted to add about the holiday growth, you hit on the consumerism. I think it's really interesting that maybe, and I'm sure it's always tried to be this way, but it feels like now as a consumer population, as we show any interest in anything, the powers that be are more than happy to overload us with what it is we think we like. So Halloween is a great example of that. You hit upon it, you start to see decorations now in August, and there's not as many as Christmas, but there's an awful lot. And really anything that you want to do for the holiday, someone is willing to create what it is they think you might need. So Halloween's a great example of that. Football is also a great example of that, in that, it used to be the NFL, for example, played on Sundays at 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock, or actually noon and 3 o'clock in our time zone. Now they play every holiday in the fall. And frankly, because I only like Halloween, I find that kind of um, interesting and maybe a little bizarre. But because I love football, I think that makes great sense. And I'm perfectly happy that, that they want to play games on Sunday morning and they want to play games on Christmas Day. But I just think it's interesting. And maybe I didn't notice it as a kid, but it feels like marketing is the people I'm going to blame for this are much better at getting us what it is we kind of show an interest in. They get it to us quickly, and it's kind of a different world. I miss some of the traditional aspects of how we used to live. That is just me being an old guy, but it's true. So I was curious, why do you think some people like to be scared?
That's a good question. I think that people like to be scared because, I mean, honestly, it brings them out of the head and into the body or into your senses. I think it brings people together to, you were talking about kind of that consumeristic fashion to just go back, and I wanted to comment that, everybody wants to feel involved and a sense of belonging. I think that's just a real natural inclination. And I think these holidays and, sports, when they are so over, populated or over consumed, it just people can kind of buy in. They can kind of take, buy the ticket, take the ride kind of thing. And I think being scared is kind of like that thing too, that notion also. It's fun, it's exciting, maybe not everybody likes to be scared. I take that back. So I just took my daughter and her friend to a couple yard haunts this last weekend, and I waited in line for an hour, and I actually contemplated that. I was like, wow, we're all just standing here trying to scare ourselves. And then when I actually went in, I was like, I don't know how much I actually enjoy this feeling. I often live pretty peacefully, and I don't like to excite my nervous system too much. So yeah, it fun? Yes. Do I need that sensation often? I would say no. I don't know. Maybe I'm not the right person to answer that.
Well, I think it's interesting that some people obviously do like to be scared because they will, you mentioned haunted houses. They're very into and up to date with scary movies, for example. I like scary books, horror books, I guess is what you would call them. But I don't read them all the time. Some of them are great. I'm a fan of Stephen King and some of his work, but I haven't read all his stuff. But I think it's interesting that there's certainly a group of the population that really find these sort of things compelling. And I don't know why. I liked what you said about how it brings people together. You can kind of jump in on that and also kind of go along for the ride, like you said. And I think a lot of people have the understanding and hey, this is just for fun. I personally never really enjoyed being scared. It just wasn't. I don't know. I do find there's so much creativity that goes into what a horror story, for example, or a movie might have to offer. But then when it gets grotesque or the shock value is not really something that I find um, interesting. Which is a really, really highbrow way of saying that sometimes I don't like to be scared because I'm afraid of being scared. So, that's the next episode. Maybe number 14 will be about my fear of fear, but hopefully we won't get too deep into that now. Um, how big a role do you feel that fear plays in life?
So I think it's important to really kind of jump in to what is fear, right? It's this, I mean, sensation, of course, but in Buddhism, we talk about fear not being the enemy, but it's a teacher. And rather than fighting or denying it, we kind of invite it in to see it clearly and to understand it and to kind of let it go. And so a lot of times fear is just this natural emotion that arises from attachment and aversion and wanting things to be a certain way or dreading what might happen. And, the Buddha kind of taught that all of that is, including fear, based on clinging in our body and our beliefs. And then what we fear is often that loss and pain, or we're afraid of death, but ultimately that is just kind of impermanence. So, in a long about way, I kind of did want to talk about how a fear rises in the body. A lot of the times we're taking the mind out of it. We're really honing that focus, that awareness of the bodily sensation. So, when fear arises for me, it's definitely tenseness, it's a racing heart, it's sweaty palms. Yeah, so I don't know, how does that arrive for you, and how does it play in your life? I'm curious too.
Well, I will tell you that it played a big role in getting me into having a meditation practice because I felt like I had fear that I couldn't identify. I couldn't justify the fear that I felt like I was carrying around. And I think that also kind of speaks to one of the reasons why I I don't like scary things per se, because it was a big deal for me, this fear. And again, it made it more difficult because I couldn't tell you what it was. There was not there still really isn't a good reason. There was just um, but there was certainly some fear. So when I started to practice, one of the goals was to have less fear, whether that just meant figuring out a way to release it, or the longer path is to figure out what that fear is, what it feels like, maybe where it came from. But ultimately it's finding it, trying to bring it out, into the open, so to speak, and being comfortable with it, make friends with it, seeing the value, learning what it is it's trying to teach you. And so I got both those. I got both the short and the long answer. In a meditation, very quickly made me feel less fear. And so, um, so because meditation can help lessen with fear, um, I think it's interesting. Maybe we could talk just a little bit about how and the why that feels that way. So, since I've already talked for a while, I'm just going to continue on now. For me, I know that one of the big things, like I said, was there was some release pretty quickly. Like I said, as I started my practice. The other thing was, and I think this is more applicable to the population, to anyone who starts practice, is that hey, over time you're going to develop this space that is yours, that this inner world that you already have, but you're going to become more aware of it. That's where you kind of spend your time when you meditate, right? You're just sitting there noticing. And so what happens is that when fear or things that cause fear come up, you have a comfortable space to, it's no longer this giant thing that's overwhelming. It's now something that you can kind of, I always like to think of it as like I can walk around the whole thing. I can see, I can get some perspective, and I can, I've told you this before, but I've always tried to practice that whatever pops up is welcome in this space. You know, whether you're afraid of snakes, sooner or later, snakes are going to pop up. Whether you're afraid of spiders, sooner or later, you're going to have thoughts about spiders because you're sitting there and they're going to, like I said, that thought will pop up and you're like, oh my God, what if there's spiders in this room? And you start to get more comfortable with that with like, hey, that's ridiculous. And if there are spiders, I don't know if there's spiders in there in the room, but there's spiders here inside of me right now and they're welcome. Let's try to get more comfortable with that. So I think that's where meditation can really help with fear and with really any other dissatisfaction or problem that you're carrying around, but having a space for it and really bringing in the story that's driving the fear and kind of divorcing the two. Spiders, maybe they're creepy, maybe they bug you, but they're not that big a deal. By the way, I really don't have a problem with spiders, but they're a good example. A lot of people do. So, what about you? You with your practice, how does it help, or what's the relationship that it builds with fear?
So mine isn't spiders, but it's snakes. No, I'm just joking. But oh yeah, I'm so original here. But it's interesting too because it is a varying degree. I would say, can I appreciate, I will use snakes as an example. Can I appreciate a snake? Yes. Do I like it more at the zoo versus the trail that I'm walking on? Absolutely. Recently I saw a copperhead on one of my favorite trails, and I haven't been back, and it's really been hard because I spooked myself. And did I know that snakes are wild animals and that they belong on in the woods and are likely on the path that I am? Yeah. But when I saw it, it was different. So how do I work with that now? I don't have that quite answer because that just happened, but in the varying degrees, one of my most deep-seated fears kind of came to light recently about, I'm kind of a hypochondriac. I can kind of take things to a really far degree really quickly when it comes to the body. And one of the things that I struggle with is the impermanence of the body. My birthday is actually on the 27th. So, around Halloween time, it's always a little close to home when I think about, the clock passing another year and, you think about impermanence. I like what you said in the sense of fear and your meditation practice, bringing awareness to it, because that's all we can do. Once you cultivate that inner world that you're kind of describing, all you can do is really observe it. I'm really blessed that I have cultivated that sense of awareness because I do have the ability to observe it. And that is such a gift of mindfulness in general. And then, that meditation and especially the mindfulness of the body and the breath, it helps with the rises and the falls of fear. And that it's like waves instead of this permanent storm that's always in your mind. So when I go into states of fear, I absolutely, especially lately, have been letting myself just feel their intensity and letting them ride out. And I just recently witnessed how much clarity you can have instead of pushing away the things you're afraid of, and just witnessing and letting them come in, like you said. So, in a long-winded answer, that's kind of how my practice handles fear.
It's amazing to me the joy is not the right word, but I'm going to go ahead and use joy. The joy that you get from having a practice and a process to deal with the things that are difficult for you. And again, being able to transform those difficulties and not be afraid of them. And it takes time, right? It's not easy. It's not simple. It's sometimes surprising too when you feel like, hey, I've seen this before. We've talked about this, on the show. Sometimes you just get sometimes life is surprising. And that's probably the thing I don't like about fear or about scary movies. I don't like the shock jump out of the closet. I don't mind the long play where the demon has been away for millennia and now he's coming back to take over the world. Yeah, that's bad news, and that's true. But it's the thing that jumps out, whether it's a monster or my daughter, whatever it is, I don't like that part of being scared. And so that's probably just me, like I said, being a giant coward. But whatever it is, um, you talked a little bit about how fear feels, the sweaty palms and the accelerated heartbeat. I always notice also that inside that dump of adrenaline that is a little bit uncomfortable, that fight or flight, boost that your body thinks you might need, because it usually comes across. I mean, unless you're in a life or death situation, which I haven't been, then it's always like a wasted, why is my blood pressure up? Now I have a problem because I have the adrenaline flowing through me and I can't get my heart rate back down. But that whole feeling just it seems to disconnect me. It's like an overload of that connection between body and soul. And it scares me a little bit. So that's kind of the way it feels for me. But again, having some of these tools has allowed us both, I think, to get more comfortable with it and kind of put that perspective to it. So um, it's interesting. It's interesting that the power of fear, but also what a great teacher if you can have the right viewpoint and the right perspective for it.
Yeah, it helps you contemplate regularly. Like, it's such a good focal point if you know what you're afraid of too, because you don't have to ruminate. That's where I kind of get stuck sometimes in rumination and, carrying the melodrama when it comes to the fear. So if I'm projecting into the future, that's going to cause me anxiety. If I'm dwelling in the past, then that's going to cause me depression. So I know that even when I'm dealing with fear, it has to be in the very present moment. So I can't sit there and draw up a storyline of, X, Y, and Z when it's actually not happening either. So it takes a lot of that power of the fear away. Sometimes I'm not going to pull the being a lady card and go on about that, but sometimes, when I'm pumping gas and I see a stranger or, somebody coming over to approach me, I can really run along with that and go, oh, maybe this person's, wishing me ill harm or going to try to trick me, or I don't know. Sometimes paranoia can set in too. And then often I have completely just made up storylines. So I think there's just a healthy balance, staying present, staying aware, especially, and because fear is like a primordial concept of us. Like it's important that we notice it, but also it's important not to just go into the delusion of it. Also, many times I've contemplated things that's never happened. So it's an interesting one. It's a primary fear, like we talked about, physically, mentally. Um, we attach everything to it. So our bodies, our possessions, our relationships, our status. And the reason why it's in all of those things is because we're scared of things being transient, you know? And that's the I think the root there. So
Right. Right. Which, by the way, is the nature of everything, right? To change. Everything's impermanent. So,
something like that.
yeah. Yeah. Damn it. We're back to that. Um, you had mentioned awareness as well. And I think that is such a valuable tool when dealing with fear because one, it's very helpful, right? When you become aware. that I'm afraid, right? And you can start, like I said, working on the perspective. But you mentioned being a female and being in a situation where maybe you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason. And that's not a female thing. People feel that. There are times when you notice or you think, hey, this maybe is not as safe as I think. But awareness is such a key there because you practice, you develop more awareness sitting on a cushion. And then you take that automatically into the rest of your life, and it becomes so much, you become safer. You become a better driver, you become a better parent, you become a better person because you're aware of what's going around you and you're staying in the present moment. And so it's a real, I think that's where I talked earlier about how my practice immediately started to make me feel less fearful. I think that is the short term solution that I got from having a meditative practice rather, is because I had more awareness and I started to notice what was around me and maybe how people were acting or maybe how I was acting and noticing, hey, this story, this paranoia that I'm starting to develop isn't really necessary, isn't really accurate. Or maybe it was the opposite and I needed to be even more on guard, but I felt better because of that. I didn't feel as likely to be startled by someone jumping out of the closet.
Yeah, that's the whole move, I would say. It's just that awareness without resistance.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that phrase. So we've talked a little bit about how it feels to be afraid. Um, I feel like fear is the energy that drives the ego. We haven't really mentioned the ego much, but I think, and again, if you're aware of that, then fear is not the problem. And it's, again, a good teacher. But if you don't stop to notice and can't see that connection, I think fear motivates us to make decisions that puts our ego in the driver's seat. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I think it's a part of it for sure. I think that it's kind of the ego's alarm system of some sorts. So, it's just again a threat to what we think we are, what we're clinging to. So, it really boils back to like that kind of sense of impermanence again, that fear. But again, how we work with it is just going to be our way out of it, or through it per se. I don't, you don't necessarily need to label it good, bad, or right or wrong. I think that has been so installed into me through TBC and to stop, wishing I was a certain a different way or it's like I don't like heights, but then my daughter loves heights. So it's funny too that we're all just so intrinsically different on what we're afraid of too. So, giving she gives me grace. She doesn't try to force me on a ride. So and I admire her from when I watch her ride off into, the clouds. I don't know.
Right.
But that grace is so important. So it's like, how do we work with that practically then? So we noticed it, like we talked about. We're going to breathe into it. So we're bringing that awareness into the sensations. And we're going to ask ourselves, what am I clinging to right now? Because I think that that's so important to realize. And then we're going to offer it the compassion, understand that fear is just trying to protect you and you can thank it. You do not need to obey it, and then you can let it pass, like that cute little watching a cloud drifting into the sky.
That's really good practical advice. I think the awareness and acceptance and patience, which I always use patience to mean that space that we're talking about that you develop when you practice that that time to notice the clouds that go by, that time, because even that, you move off your cushion, you become more aware of the fact that you don't have to be so reactionary. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to, change the world. You can accept what you see. So if awareness and acceptance and patience are kind of the three pillars of positive experience you get from practice, I always like to concentrate on well, what's the flip side of that coin? And for me, it's, try not to try to be aware when you're just wanting something. The wanting is a real problem. Judging is another one. And then fear, try not to be I don't want to say try not to be afraid. I think it's more important to be aware of it. Be aware, notice it, be there with it, use it as a tool. There was no question in there, but that's kind of what like I said, those are the three things if there's a positive side, then there's got to be a negative side. And those are the three on each side. So the other thing I think is interesting is a Sangha can be such a refuge to big fears. I've found that to be true. Is that true for you as well?
Absolutely. I have brought so many of my fears over the years to Sangha and to Victor and to Robert and to even you recently. So, I'm so appreciative that I have the people around me that if I let in, and that's the big thing, that if I let in and let them help me, let them love me, then Sangha will be there for you. So I don't have to go through all the things that scare me or bump in the night alone. Absolutely not. And that has given me so much power back, 100%. So, and it's so interesting how brave that we naturally become when you build the practice around these things. And you could just grow a natural sense of confidence slowly at the things that you're afraid of. And it doesn't even have to be an Academy Award
Right.
movie moment. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's part of being in a Sangha as well. And we always talk about the power and the support, but really, and again, the refuge. It's certainly there for people when they need that. But I think it's also interesting that just like the space you build when you practice, you start to develop this space in the Sangha. And it's not formal. It's not, this is my kingdom here in the hall. It's just that, again, it's authentic. It's people showing up for one another, offering compassion, believing in equanimity, offering acceptance. And so when a problem shows up, whether I bring it or you bring it or whatever that is, whatever that thing is that is scaring an individual or a group, it's welcome there. And it's part of that, hey, it's just what we're going through. It's just where we are right now. So let's take a look at it. So the last thing I had is I kind of feel like Western Buddhism is, I was going to say a solution to fear. That's probably the wrong word, but it's a way to transform fear from a negative to a real positive teacher. Is that accurate for you as well?
Yeah, so I joke that Buddhists are the only people that would invite their fear down for tea. And so I love that. It gives me confidence to work it into my practice. I get all the heavy life topics. So, I don't like to say, dive deep every time, but you don't have to attack like the biggest topics, death, impermanence, fear, all of these things at once, but just digest them into little bits and work with them. So yeah, the refuge that we take in Sangha is amazing. And I would say that uh you'd be surprised how unique you feel your fears are until you share them. And then there's somebody out there who you can definitely relate to.
That is so true. Hey, I
Speaking
want
of
to thank,
sharing,
oh,
hold on, real fast, Wit. I
yeah,
have a second joke for you.
let's hear it.
What's a monster's favorite game?
I do not know, Jordan, what is a monster's favorite game?
Hide and shriek.
Okay, I was going to thank Jordan for being our co-host this episode, and I'm still going to, but now I'm going to only partially credit her for her wisdom and her candor. She's a valuable member of our OTR team and a great friend. Om on the Range can be found on Spotify as well as the Temple Buddhist Center Facebook page. We can be reached on those platforms or through our email at omontherange podcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and remember that better health and happiness are available to all people. It just takes practice. This is Om on the Range wishing you happy trails. Thank you to Mr. Tim Behrens for producing this episode, and thank you to Brad Athey for providing the music. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey as we discuss meditation and Western Buddhism and celebrate the path to a happier and healthier life. Less suffering and more joy are available to all people. While we cannot control what happens to us, We can't control how we react. It just takes practice. Until next time, stay grounded and find peace in the simple, practical solutions. This is Om on the Range, wishing you happy trails.